brand as a more American-looking company, I guess. Like I think they added Trump's former head of DHS, Christy Nielsen, I think is her name, to the board, and they have Michael Chertoff, the former one of the early heads of DHS under Bush.
So there. Everything and everyone is captured, and everything is corrupt. Are they really good
I think that's kind of a simplification. I think not everything has always been like that. I think this particular group, once they got their hands on power, it's a faction. They've been consolidating control for a long time. And I think the advent of technology, big tech sort of taking over our lives, has really facilitated that. Because the whole conclusion to my book is that why would you take someone like Epstein down? You don't need people like him anymore to compromise people, because all of our lives are increasingly online. So if they want something on you, they can just harvest it off through, whether it's Palantir, it ends up in your Palantir database, basically. It's sucked up by the NSA or GCHQ or any of these other agencies, and you're profiled based on it. Or if there isn't incriminating stuff, they can plant incriminating stuff on your devices.
So you're screwed either way.
If they want to screw you, sure, yeah. And so it's much easier to consolidate power under those circumstances.
Do you think there are...
And they elevate people who are compromised to positions of power. How did a guy like Dennis Hastert become Speaker of the House of the United States when it was known that he was a pedophile years before getting to that position? Because they can hold it over his head the whole time.
Do you think there are a lot of Epsteins operated?
Well, yeah, my whole book is about how Epstein was not an anomaly. I mentioned the example of Adnan Khashoggi, but I mentioned Robert Keith Gray, who Robert Maxwell hired when he came, to the U.S., made his big entry into New York City. He was also involved in sex blackmail stuff. There was a page boy scandal he was related to in the 1980s. The guy's name, I think Larry Craig was the name of the main congressman or senator involved. And Craig denied all the charges, but then got caught in the early 2000s for soliciting, sex in a bathroom in an airport or something like that. But there's been a ton of these scandals over the years. And then you have figures like Roy Cohn, who I mentioned earlier, involved in sex blackmail activities as well. There's a lot of these figures.
Sex blackmail seems to become very useful.
Well, it is. Because, this is one of those things that's a holdover from the mob that later gets absorbed by intelligence agencies because they see its utility.
So if we see someone rich, famous,
knowing information, the sexual blackmail information, the CIA, that's the intelligence to them. We want to gather intelligence on these people and then use it to our benefit for national security interests.
Which is all economic.
Well, more often than not, but, it's obviously other things too. I think it depends on the circumstance, really.
It's so hard to get your head around it.
Well, I've thought about, I understand that my books are like a lot of information, but the thing is, we're never going to get an affidavit from the CIA being like, yes, we did bad things. Like, we've known they've done bad things in various decades. It's been very documented, and they won't admit to bad things there in almost every one of those cases. So it's like, you're not going to get that about Epstein or about anybody else.
So why do you think Epstein became almost like the central figure for all of this corrupt global elite meta cartel?
Well, he's just a microcosm of it, really. But I think
is it his own
he became too exposed, especially after his first arrest. And as he described it, he became radioactive. But he had, before been able to move through all these different circles with impunity and was a well-respected guy in these elite circles, right? He was useful to a lot of people, mainly for money things, but also for other more illegal things from what we know about the case as it's developed. So I think since then, I don't know, he tried to rebrand as like a tech entrepreneur and all this stuff, but he was allegedly still cultivating important relationships. He was reportedly advising Tesla on how to take Tesla private. He claimed to be advising Treasury on their Department of Treasury on cryptocurrency and anti-hacking efforts. All sorts of, he was still doing a lot of stuff between those arrests. It's just, the public association was no longer beneficial for a lot of powerful people.
But he was considered financially illiterate.
By who?
Well, I think Eric Weinstein came out and said he's a moron.
Yeah, that's interesting. Doesn't he work for Teal Capital? I'm not super familiar with Eric Weinstein's Epstein story, but as I understand it, he talks a lot more about his impressions of Epstein at the meeting as opposed to why he was going there. And I believe he ran a hedge fund at the time. So why would you be going to Epstein as a hedge fund guy? I don't know.
Well, it seems like everybody met with Epstein at one time.
Yeah, for financial stuff. But I do not believe that he was financially illiterate. He was very successful. He would not have been tapped in the 80s by people like Adnan Khashoggi and Douglas Leese if he was not savvy. He helped orchestrate one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history at Towers Financial, but his name got dropped from the case like 3 months in. I mean, how do you do that by being financially illiterate? Why would Leslie Wexner give you power of attorney over all of his affairs?
Well, that is also very weird, though.
But would he do that for someone who's financially illiterate? Because Epstein had several years between 1987 or 1985, depending on who you believe, when the introduction was made.
But why give it to him anyway?
Well, obviously, Wexner liked Epstein very much. I think there's no questions there. There's this murder of Wexner's tax attorney. And then not long after that, Epstein comes into Wexner's world and untangles his tangled finances, whatever that means. And Epstein, during that time, before then, between 1981 and 1985, described himself as a financial bounty hunter. He was hired to find money that had been stolen, and he hid away stolen money for powerful people. He played both sides. And someone who can effectively do that, he was hired by like very fancy, like aristocratic people for those purposes, admittedly. Like a very aristocratic Spanish family being one of them. They would not just hire some financially illiterate idiot to do that kind of stuff for them. And Adnan Khashoggi was one of his clients too. He's not going to hire a financially illiterate guy to do that. I think it's bull, and it's part of this narrative that's been woven about Epstein, about how he was just charismatic and him being good at anything else was just a facade.
So it's a distraction.
Well, yeah, because by that narrative inherently means don't look any deeper into what Epstein was doing in his early history, for example.